It's Sunday, August 17, 2014, and the reporters are looking to cause some trouble. First up, ready, set, run. The race is now set for governor and U.S. Senate.
I think we can do better.
We look at the money game, the personalities, the positions.
So I think you're going to see a very by-the-book kind of attack.
The Mustafa Mafia. The feds break up an international cell phone theft ring based right here in the Twin Cities.
And they think they're just scratching the surface.
Let's play this backwards and see if it gets any better. Ready as a devil.
Twitter or not, the death of Robin Williams and the perils of social media memorials. The Scorsese of Meow. A director tells us why the Walker struck viral gold with cat videos. All that plus a breakfast club that is wired and ready to roll. The Reporter starts right now. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for making The Reporters part of your Sunday morning. For a look back at a busy week that really had a bit of everything. 2 ongoing manhunts, an organized crime ring, and the death of a couple Hollywood legends. But we want to start by looking forward and a race that's now set for governor. Hennepin County Commissioner Jeff Johnson holding back 3 challengers in the Republican primary. Kurt Zellers, Marty Seifert, and Scott Honor all showed up at a press conference Wednesday morning in a sign of support. And if voter turnout is any indication, Republicans will need to be united. Give me your 20-second elevator pitch for why you should be governor.
Sure, I think we can do better than how we're doing. And you know, Mark Dayton will speak to the unemployment rate as being okay in Minnesota, but we have a lot of people who are in jobs that they don't want or who are working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. And that's really what this comes down to. Jobs in Minnesota, and not just minimum wage jobs, but real jobs, welcoming entrepreneurs back in.
If nothing else, it promises to be a study in political contrasts. Jeff Johnson, the lone Republican Hennepin County Commissioner, every bit the fiscal conservative. Governor Mark Dayton, the unapologetic liberal, taxing the rich, increasing state spending, and raising the minimum wage.
He voted against the minimum wage when he was in the legislature, and now he wants to take away the increases that people will have.
I do not, however, support these automatic increases. I think that's really bad policy. I think the legislature and the governor should have to vote on that.
Brianna Biersbach is covering the race for MinnPost.
And I think that you're going to see a pretty serious debate about the issues. And a stark contrast between Republican policies and Democratic policies, but maybe a little bit more of a nuanced conversation than we might have had in a year like 2010.
And Republicans hope Johnson does better with female voters than Tom Emmer did 4 years ago by coming off every bit the suburban dad he is. But if the primary is any indication, voter turnout could be a problem for Republicans. 183,000 GOP votes for governor in a 4-way race. But look at this, 7,000 more votes for Dayton, who is unopposed.
If 4 Republican candidates, all who desperately want the nomination, can't get their people out to the polls, I think that's a concern for some Republicans looking at November.
He said something to the effect that I'm a good and decent person. He's a good and decent person. We have different opinions about what's best for Minnesota, and that's why we have elections. So I hope we can keep it on that plane.
Here's my vision for Minnesota, which is very different from his. But you know, doing that in a way that doesn't get personal or nasty is important to me.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
And I mean that.
Thanks.
We do mean that. Mike McFadden won the Republican primary to take on Senator Al Franken. We will talk about that race in a few minutes with the Breakfast Club. For 6 months, he has been on the run, but former Minnesota cult leader Victor Barnard possibly spotted Wednesday in Raymond, Washington, 124 miles west of Seattle. The Washington State Patrol says he was spotted leaving a McDonald's there, driving an Audi with a woman in the car, and heading up Highway 101 towards Aberdeen. I talked to the host of Washington's Most Wanted, who told us detectives are taking this sighting very seriously. Indication why the Washington State Patrol believes this particular sighting is credible?
It's just not something they do in our state. They believe that this is Victor Barnard, and they're hoping that by releasing it to the public, he can be brought into custody and brought to justice.
Barnard's been on the run since March when Pine County prosecutors charged him with 59 counts of sexually abusing minors. The charges coming after a Fox 9 investigation last February into his River Road Fellowship, in which 2 of his former followers told us they were sexually abused by Barnard beginning when they were just 12 and 13 years old. Barnard and about 100 followers left Minnesota for Washington State about 5 years ago. If you've ever had a cell phone stolen, it may have ended up in the hands of an organized crime ring based right here in the Twin Cities. The U.S. attorney indicting 20 members of the Mustafa family crime syndicate which stole or bought cell phones from all over the country and resold them overseas, netting at least $10 million. 7 brothers, all part of the Mustafa family, were the alleged ringleaders, operating out of 13 cell phone storefronts around the Twin Cities. The simultaneous raids going down Tuesday, and Fox 9's Maury Glover was all over this one.
It sounds pretty major. How big an operation was this?
Well, they say multi-million dollars worth of and tens of thousands of stolen cell phones that they were selling both in stores like this, and they were shipping overseas to sell in black markets in China, India, places like that. So, and they think they're just scratching the surface. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg.
One guy alone stole 9,000 phones?
9,000 phones, made like $3 million for the organization, and that's really a conservative kind of estimate. He was one of 8 runners that were indicted yesterday, but actually they believe they were working with a lot more.
18 of the 20 indicted are in custody. Investigators are also looking at ties to another organized crime group that was stealing phones from Walmarts around the country. All eyes have been on the standoff in Ferguson, Missouri this week, which overnight has become the most racially volatile city in America. The FBI stepping in to investigate the police shooting of an unarmed 18-year-old black man, Michael Brown. The State Patrol taking over security in the city. Police finally releasing the name of the officer who killed Brown, Officer Darren Wilson. They'd held off because of alleged death threats. President Obama calling on police to be open and transparent in the investigation.
I know that emotions are raw right now in Ferguson, and there are certainly passionate differences about what has happened. There are going to be different accounts of how this tragedy occurred. There are going to be differences in terms of what needs to happen going forward. That's part of our democracy. But let's remember that we're all part of one American family. We are united in common values, and that includes belief in equality under the law, a basic respect for public order, and the right to peaceful public protest.
Further complicating a muddled story already, police released surveillance video Friday allegedly showing Brown in a strong-arm robbery right before the shooting, but apparently had nothing to do with why the officers stopped him. The chief says Brown was stopped for walking down the middle of the street. So, running the numbers, why is Ferguson, Missouri such a racial tinderbox? We'll consider the St. Louis suburb of 21,000 is 60% black. Virtually all its police officers, though, are white. Just 3 out of 53 officers black. The police chief and mayor of Ferguson, also both white. Just 1 city council member and 1 school board member are black. Racial profiling there is really a huge concern. 483 black people were arrested there last year, only 36 white people. 92% of the searches, 86% of the car stops involved blacks. 24% of the people in Ferguson live below the poverty line, about 1.5 times the statewide rate. About 1 in 3 of those living in poverty is black. That is running the numbers. Here's a look at the other big stories this week. Ty Hoffman, still at large, but now charged with killing his former domestic and business partner, Kelly Phillips. Hoffman has been on the run since the shooting last Monday morning at a gas station in Arden Hills. Phillips was an executive at Boston Scientific and co-owner of the bar Lush in northeast Minneapolis, where Hoffman was forced out as manager. A verdict expected this week in the trial of a woman accused of egging on her husband in a deadly neighborhood feud. Paul Zumbridge of New Brighton faces aiding and abetting second-degree murder from the shooting last May. The defense rested with no witnesses, stunning those in the courtroom. No jury in this trial. A judge will decide what happens to Zumbridge this week. Neil Zumbridge will go on trial at a later date. France has the Cannes Film Festival. Utah has Sundance. Minnesota has the Internet Cat Video Festival at the Walker Art Museum. Some 10,000 people showing up for this free event that began 3 years ago and really became an overnight success. It brings out a lot of characters, that's for sure. The screen went down for a moment, but the show went on. The winner of this year's Golden Kitty was Rob Moore, his cat Cody as well, and the 8 Signs of Addiction. The drug of choice here being a banana catnip toy. I talked to this year's curator, Will Braden. He's the director who took home the Golden Kitty in 2012 about why cat videos have become this cultural phenomena.
A long time, cats and the internet, it's been popular. It just wasn't so cool to acknowledge it, so cool to talk about it. It was sort of, there was a stigma attached to it, you know, the crazy cat lady or things like that.
I thought your French existential cat video was brilliant. Whatever gave you that idea?
Well, last minute panic. I was in film school and I had a project to do.
Moisseau, Satan s'est tombé. Le blanc imbécile s'est trop sous-saché à la mendicité pour les cheeseburgers. Je suis enterré pour das idiots.
Well, I'm sure people come up to you and say, hey, I've got a cat and she's a star. I mean, because I do have a cat and she is a star and she should be in your video. That must happen to you all the time.
It happens all the time. And what I tell people is that it's very possible that you have a star cat. You can't just force your cat to become famous. It has to happen on its own.
Cats tell us about our own humanity, don't they? By the way, nearly 9 million YouTube views for his Golden Kitty Award winner, Pas de Deux. Take that, Sundance. Still to come on The Reporters, when social media takes a bad turn and the death of Robin Williams. A local GOP official taking some heat this week for his tweet. We join the Breakfast Club, Professor David Schultz, Republican strategist Michael Broadcorp, former KSDP anchor and MinnPost reporter Cindy Bricado. We are hoping they're caffeinated and ready to go for the Breakfast Club. Back in a few.
I'm so honored to have won the primary. And I can tell you, we did it without saying one bad word about another Republican, period. We need to unify our party.
Primary day turnout pretty dismal, though, this year, but the ballot for this November is set. Mike McFadden facing off against Senator Al Franken and GOP gubernatorial candidate Jeff Johnson hoping to unseat Governor Mark Dayton. Well, it's time to talk shop with this morning's Breakfast Club. I am joined by Michael Broadcorp, who is a political consultant, also a blogger at the Star Tribune, Cindy Bricado of MinnPost, formerly of KSTP, anchor, and actually several other stations in your history here in the Twin Cities, and the ubiquitous David Schultz, professor at Hamline University, who we've had on quite a bit. Let's talk McFadden and Franken. What do we think about his chances? And are Republicans still running against the idea of Al Franken? I think they had this notion 6 years ago that Al Franken was going to provide them with a lot of material and ammunition, and it doesn't seem to have worked out that way. Cindy?
Well, you know, I went to the news conference that Ken Martin held the day after the primary, and he issued a warning to Mike McFadden saying, anybody who's trying to buy this election, beware, which was actually pretty funny coming out of Ken Martin's mouth, with Mark Dayton having been a self-financed candidate in 2010.
And his ex also financing Democrats.
And Al Franken having plenty of money in the bank. I think the Democrats are going to be worried about McFadden because of his ability to raise money. Actually, McFadden himself hasn't ponied up that much out of his personal fortune, which is considerable. So I think in that respect, there will be some concern, and it's just a question of whether McFadden can come across as looking, well, senatorial.
He did a great job at the state convention. He went from being booed earlier in the part of the convention to just winning it the old-fashioned way. He's got a great operation. He has comes in relatively unknown, not a lot of political baggage, not a lot of votes, and he's going to make the case about Franken's record. This race has become closer and closer the farther that it's gotten away from the state convention. And it's really put the Democrats a little bit off their game a bit because McFadden was able to come into that convention and win. And so they weren't expecting that, and now it's a one-on-one race between McFadden and Franken, and it's going to be a very interesting race to watch.
David, it is really kind of the mirror image of Franken versus Coleman, where they really tried to tie Coleman into Bush. Right. And really it seems like McFadden's objective is going to be to tie Franken into Obama and certainly Obamacare.
Right, that's going to be the core narrative, because in some sense, I think you're right, in the sense that money's going to sort of equalize between the two candidates potentially. Now, I say potentially because if McFadden looks like he's within striking distance, money's going to come in. If it doesn't look like he's within striking distance, money's going to go elsewhere because Republicans are going to want to fund other candidates with a better shot. But assuming he looks like he's in, you're right. They're now going to tie him as the narrative, and that's going to be a big issue I want to talk about today. The narrative is going to be Obamacare, Obama's unpopularity, and that's where they're really going to go at this point. Whereas I think what Franken's going to try to do is to really push it back onto McFadden and to try to get him to commit himself, because we have to be honest, so far in the debates that he's done and in his sort of his statements about where he stands on issues, he's not exactly been very clear and not exactly been the best in the world. The only other thing I want to mention also about that race too, you remember, it was 315 votes he won by last time. And so we're looking at an incumbent who did not win by very much.
Skin of his teeth.
Skin of his teeth. seat. So if he wins by 316, it's a landslide this time.
Exactly.
But the point being at this point is that it shouldn't be a surprise that it's a close race, given the fact that he barely won 6 years ago.
McFadden is tabula rasa at this point. He really is a blank slate. How does he deserve to be filled in? I mean, I know, Franken's team is going to try to fill him in as to the right of Attila the Hun, but where do we think he is on the spectrum of republicanism?
I would say I would give him center-right. I don't think, I think he was challenged at the convention for endorsement by candidates who were more conservative than he was. He had to pull out an endorsement from Michelle Bachmann at the end because he used some of the people that were running a very successful campaign in the 6th District, very well run there with Tom Emmer, and he got some of those campaign folks to weigh in and help pull the Bachmann endorsement in. In other words, he needed to be portrayed to the activists as more conservative than he is.
This is also someone in McFadden who went to a Tea Party event and didn't get a real strong response. And so I think the Democrats are going to have a very difficult time pigeoning him into a hole and putting him into a hole where he's this Tea Party extremist when he went to a Tea Party event and didn't get a very warm reception because he is, as Cindy said, quite center-right.
Yeah, but just think about what he's done in the last week. He first said he was supportive perhaps of a gas tax increase, then had to retreat. And I think one of the difficulties that he faces, again, as he's trying to come up with a narrative to define himself, he's got to be on a consistent message at this point. And if he doesn't have a consistent message, what you're going to see the Democrats do is paint the narrative about him, maybe as a flip-flopper, maybe as somebody you can't trust. But that's the thing.
Or somebody that doesn't know what he's talking about.
But that's more dangerous. That's even more dangerous.
Let's move to Johnson and Dayton for a sec. We talked a lot about this off the top of the show, but I want to kind of spin this a little bit a different way about the optics of this. Mark Dayton, not the best public speaker. I don't think that's a secret. Johnson appears very energized. And I think Dayton, coming off of his surgery, is moving a little slower. Are the optics bad? Because this is going to be an uphill battle for Johnson. I think most people would agree on that. How much will just the visual play into this race, do you think?
Well, apparently that's my bailiwick, huh? A little bit it will play into effect, but not a lot. Simply because the public knows, the voters know Mark Dayton already. They have seen him in action. They've seen him in 4 years. They've commiserated with him over the death of his dog and
he's humanized
and celebrated with him over the birth of his grandson. I think that's all. You want to talk about a storyline here? Right. That's a powerful storyline for people who have always, in this state, in my impression, voters really personalize their governor. Their governor is that's their man, and maybe someday their woman.
Let's just move on to Twitter this week with the death of Robin Williams. Kind of went crazy, but a little local controversy here. DFL social media director Ellen Anderson tweeted out, my cat's nickname is Nanu Nanu. The world is lucky Robin Williams was able to show his genius with so many. But the deputy chair of the state's Republican Party, Chris Fields, responded, how very 80s. Want an economy like we had in the 80s under Reagan? Vote Jeff Johnson tomorrow in the primary. He was eaten up. Robin Williams' daughter is also off on Twitter. She's quitting it. She's been trolled. I got to tell you guys, I think that the politicians, and really the people behind the politicians, do a disservice by getting on Twitter and really having their venom out there.
Twitter is one of the most unthoughtful social media platforms that is out there, and as someone who uses it aggressively that I do, the bar is continually lowered on a very regular basis. And this latest example is just another clear example of how unthoughtful of a medium it can be. Yeah. There just simply are not enough characters in a Twitter, when you're limited to 140 characters, to put out a thoughtful response and to be thoughtful in a medium. And when a death such as tragic as Robin Williams occurs, it's a time for people to pause and not try to drag politics into it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing here. I mean, two things. One, there's no real good political capital to be gained in sort of really commenting on the death of somebody like Robin Williams or something like that. I mean, this is just let it go, and I think you run more the risk of just damaging yourself. And I think you're absolutely right. In a world of 140 characters, it's and just pushing a button, it's too easy to say too many stupid things. Yeah. And so you'd be better off just letting it go.
Offer your condolences and move on. We're going to end here, and thank you, Breakfast Club. We're going to end with a bit of a tribute to Robin Williams, and when we come back, we go on the record about trying to find the sermon in a suicide. We'll be right back.
Song going out to you right now.
I see trees of green.
I do voices. Yeah!
We've come to this planet looking for intelligent life. Oops, we made a mistake.
We're happy to be in America. Don't ask for a green card.
Well, how do you talk and drink at the same time? Must be Drool City.
Miss Helen? The water's boiling.
In case of emergency, the exits are here, anywhere.
I was the only child in my block on Halloween to go trick or trout.
Exit.
It's time to go on the record about finding the sermon in the suicide. It seems obvious and cliche to say this, but we may never know why Robin Williams took his life. The shadow of Parkinson's, money, divorce, disappointments, addiction. It's probably complicated and pretty simple too. Depression. It kills 30,000 of us every year. We know this about suicide. It is sadly contagious, a social contagion where one suicide inspires another and so on. In fact, 1 in 20 teen suicides is actually motivated by a previous one. The year Marilyn Monroe died in 1962, the suicide rate jumped 12%. Don't get me wrong. This week there was a legitimate opportunity to talk about depression. And remember, if someone is talking about suicide or not being around, if they're no longer doing the things that make them happy, talk to them, get them help, don't wait. And people want to know the prurient details, I get that. But sometimes we in the media like to tie it all into a nice tidy narrative. The myth of the tortured artist, the tears of the clown. But let's do Robin Williams a favor. Let's not over-intellectualize, scandalize, apologize, glamorize, or most of all, let us not mythologize his death. He was a complicated, immensely talented genius and human being. He deserves more than a sermon on suicide. That's The Reporters. Thanks for joining me this morning. Have a great week, and we hope to see you back here next Sunday morning.